I'd love to talk a little bit about parenting. I know you have 2 boys and a girl, right? I have 2 boys and a girl as well. But first, I'm curious about how you grew up. I mean, how, you know, where did you grow up, and what did your parents do?
So my father came to the United States when he was 12 from a little city outside of Palermo called Ragusa in Sicily. And his mom, my grandmother, and her two sisters were in a convent, and they escaped out of the convent. They were orphans. They escaped out of the convent and left, and she met my grandfather, who was a Italian suit designer, and so they migrated to the United States in the 30s, and so my mother, her father was from Siragusa, which is the eastern side of Sicily, and my grandmother was just a very unique, very different person. Was from Pugliese area and then ultimately Sicily.
Well, why was she unique, or what was unique about her?
She was just different. She was probably half African, very soulful rhythm, really like cool in a different way, just really unique. And so my parents were, for the most part, my mother was first generation, my father, from Italy, and my father went to New York, and my mother New York, and then to the suburbs of New Jersey across the river there. And so I think what made so was my brother and I. What made it so unique was that my parents were very simple people. And they were also very progressive. They always wanted to learn. They always wanted to do the right thing, or at least provide opportunities for my brother and I from a very early age. And they just really supported our interests. I mean, we had to do well in school. I mean, that was just the way it had to be. But they gave us a lot of freedom to explore, to discover. And, family was a huge part of our lives, I can't remember, like, maybe a couple times when my dad had to work late and we ate dinner without my dad. It was like a big deal, right? So we were just a tight family. They provided quite a bit of, a nice middle class, upper middle class family in the suburbs of New Jersey. And whatever our interests were, like my brother's a fabulous artist, and he's been doing oil paintings since he was 4, like that's still hanging, in our homes. Very, very in an adult class. And so whatever our interests were, whatever it was, I mean, I talked my dad into seminars, to come to seminars and pretend like he was a doctor when I was 16. I said, don't talk, let's just go and learn. And I'd say, don't say anything, because he was he's more of a manual labor technician, had his own business. So we always talk my parents into doing crazy stuff.
Coming with you so you could go learn.
Yeah, so I can go learn. I said, just say you're Dr. Dispenza, don't say a word. Just go, and I'll just be, And he would do it. We'd talk him into all kinds of stuff. So my parents were fun like that. They'd go, okay, all right, So I grew up in a very happy household. My father was a very Italian, emotional, kiss his kids, hug his kids, wrestle with his kids, My mother was very practical. I learned a lot about how to be practical. My mother was very practical. She applied, and so
she had to run probably the household and the budget and make sure everything happened.
Yeah, she did that. My dad did a lot of that too, but she just was very practical, which made her step outside of certain models, whether it was a religious model or whatever it was. She had a lot of common sense, and she'd say, that just doesn't sound right to me. I don't think it's that way. And so they would have these conversations. So when I got to be older, in my teenage years and when I went to college, they were fully engaged with whatever we were doing. If we fasted for a week, they fasted with us. They were just...
And you were doing that back then?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was doing all that stuff. And if I was just raw food for 3 months or 2 months, just to experiment, just because I was in the midst of it, okay, let's go, And so they were just the type of people that participated, but they always endorsed our interests. And so I had a lot of opportunities to experiment and do quite a bit of things. And so I grew up in a really normal household I mean, of course, there were always challenges, you know, you're a teenager and, you know, all that stuff. But when I got older and I started to meet people in college and date different people, and I didn't know that I didn't know that people had such difficult lives. It just didn't even occur to me that people had that. It wasn't even part of my experience, you know.
People that had difficult childhoods and divorce and anger and fighting.
I didn't have a lot of thoughts about that until I was in my late teenage years, because I grew up in such a kind of normal, healthy environment. So I don't know. I think that because of the way they raised my brother and I, we are very liberal in the way we think. I'm not afraid to try something out or think out of the box. I'm not afraid to fail. And my dad was always made it no big deal when you failed. He just was like, come on, don't worry about it, you know. Just do it again, you know, try it again, don't worry about it, you know. So we learned a lot about adaptability, and we learned a lot about modifying our behaviors quite a bit. And we had pretty much a really fun childhood, you know, really wonderful, yeah. And now I understand the importance of parenting because of them.
Because they also gave you a really strong base to where you could go and pursue those interests and have kind of that safe structure.
And confidence that I had something to come back to, you know, and there was a place that I could come back to that was solid. They gave us a lot of freedom, and there was just certain rules that just you never crossed. And you could have all the freedom you want, but these were the things that were just expected. So we had a fun childhood, yeah.
You know, there's a hip hop band called the Beastie Boys, and they just came out with a book called the Beastie Boys book. And you know, they were these three kids in these, you know, nice families in New York City, you know, middle class, upper middle class, and they would kind of say, your grades are important, but you can do whatever you want. And they would be going out at 15 years old to these crazy places all over the city, and because of the freedom the parents gave them, they were able to create this incredible music.
Yeah.
But if they had been like told to stay in and do all this stuff, it never would have happened. So it's that weird fine line.
It is. I call it the stallion paddock philosophy. Stallion paddock, just a lot of big pasture, just a lot of high fences, you know. So, and with my children, you know, I used to say to them when they were young, I'd say, when they stepped outside the paddock, I'd say, ooh, that's an adult decision. And with adult decisions comes adult responsibilities, and that's an adult decision, so I can't support you right now. You're making an adult decision, so you're on your own on this one. And that was kind of a moment for my kids to just kind of go, ooh, it's cold out here.
What would be an example of that?
Well, if they did something like, I don't know, they took their car somewhere that they weren't supposed to, or whatever, I don't know, something that stretched the limit, took 2 days off from school because they had to do something or whatever. I never react to it. I would just decide that I had to pull back a little bit.
Right.
And by pulling back, they felt the chill, you know. Okay. And I think that you give children that freedom, and then when you decide not to support them any longer because they cross that line, and you give them, okay, that's an adult decision, you get this adult responsibilities that come with that, I can't support that, they start to think, oh, I don't want to be out here alone, you know, I don't want to do this. So I think that stallion paddock is healthy, and as they get older and they start developing a sense of identity, and their testosterone levels go up and their estrogen levels start changing and values start to change, and you know, they have this huge change from a boy or a little girl to a woman or a man. I think that's a trial and error period where they're really working out their identity. And I think it's really important to have healthy conversations during that time. Not when they're emotional, but when you're sitting down and having a meal, or just talking about, so what do you think about this, or what are your views about that, or how do you think you did here? It gives them the opportunity to become self-aware. And I think self-awareness is such an important element for a young person.